Picture a quiet village nestled at the edge of a forest, where the trees grow so thick they swallow the moonlight whole. It's late now, the kind of late where the world feels heavy, and the only sound is the soft rustle of leaves brushing against each other in the dark. Somewhere in that village, hidden behind a row of crooked houses, there's a well, old, forgotten, its stones crumbling into the earth. You can almost see it, can't you? The way the shadows cling to its edges, the way the air around it feels just a little too still. This is where our story begins tonight, with a well that's more than it seems, a place where whispers drift up from the dark like secrets longing to be heard. Settle in, let your breathing slow, and listen as the night weaves its tale. There's nothing to fear here, just a gentle pull into something strange and quiet. The village had a name once, but no one remembers it now. Not the people who lived there, not the travelers who passed through, not even the wind that carried their stories away. It was small, a cluster of homes with sagging roofs and windows that stared out like tired eyes. The well sat at the far end, near the forest's edge, surrounded by a low wall that had long since given up trying to stand straight. Its stones were moss-covered, slick with dampness that never seemed to dry, even in the heat of summer. A wooden cover rested over the top, warped and splintered, held in place by a rusted chain that clinked faintly when the breeze stirred. No one went near it, not anymore, though the older folk still told tales about the days when it gave water, clear, cold, and sweet. They said it stopped one night, years ago, when the whispers started, soft at first, like a sigh rising from the depths. Ella was new to the village, a young woman with a suitcase full of clothes and a past she didn't talk about. She'd come looking for quiet, a place to rest where no one asked questions, and the village seemed perfect, empty, still, wrapped in a silence that felt like a blanket. She rented a small house near the well, close enough to see it from her window, its dark shape framed against the trees. The first night, she slept fine, the quiet lulling her into a dreamless rest, but the second night was different. She woke to a sound, faint and far away, like someone murmuring in another room. It wasn't loud, wasn't sharp, just a hum that slid under her skin and stayed there, pulling her eyes open in the dark. She lay still, listening, her breath shallow, waiting for it to stop. But it didn't. It grew, soft and steady, calling her toward the window. Outside, the night was thick, the kind of dark that presses against your chest and makes the world feel smaller. Ella stood at the glass, her fingers resting on the sill, staring at the well. The chain on the cover swayed, though the air was calm, and the sound came again, whispers, low and layered, rising from the blackness below. She couldn't make out words, not yet, just a rhythm that felt alive, like breathing. Her heart beat a little faster, not from fear, but from something else, a pull she couldn't name. She told herself it was the wind, or maybe an animal trapped down there, but deep down she knew it wasn't. Wind didn't whisper like that, didn't call her name. She pulled a sweater over her shoulders, grabbed a lantern from the table, and stepped outside, the grass cold against her bare feet. The village was asleep, the houses dark and silent as she moved toward the well. The lantern's light flickered, casting long shadows that danced across the ground, and the whispers grew clearer with every step. Not loud, never loud, but close, like someone standing just behind her. She stopped at the wall, her breath fogging in the chilly air, and peered at the cover. Up close, It looked older than she'd thought, the wood etched with faint lines that might have been scratches or writing, worn smooth by time. The chain clinked again, a soft sound that made her skin prickle, and she reached out, her fingers brushing the cold metal. The whispers paused just for a moment, as if holding their breath, and then they started again, softer, sweeter, curling around her like a lullaby. She shouldn't have lifted the cover, she knew that, but the sound was too strong, too gentle, promising something she couldn't turn away from. The cover was heavy, heavier than it looked, but it came up with a groan, revealing a circle of darkness so deep it seemed to swallow the lantern's light. Ella leaned forward, her hair falling around her face, and the air from the well brushed her skin. Cool, damp, carrying a scent like wet stone and something older, something forgotten. The whispers were everywhere now, filling the space around her, and she could almost hear words. Stay, listen, rest. Her hand shook as she held the lantern over the edge, its glow barely touching the walls, which were slick and smooth, stretching down into nothing. She didn't see the bottom, didn't see anything move, but the sound wrapped around her, warm and heavy, pulling her closer. Her eyes felt tired, her body soft, like she could lean in and drift away forever. She didn't notice the lantern slipping from her fingers until it fell, tumbling silently into the dark. The light vanished, swallowed by the well, and for a moment Ella stood there, alone in the night, the whispers her only company. They didn't stop, didn't fade. They grew, weaving through her thoughts, soft and endless, like a song she'd always known. She took a step back, her heart slow and steady, and sat on the low wall, her legs dangling over the side. The village stayed quiet, the forest still, and the well kept talking, its voice a thread that tied her to the dark. She didn't fight it, didn't want to. The sound was too kind, too calm, promising rest in a way nothing else ever had. Her eyes drifted shut. Her breathing matched the rhythm of the whispers, and the night folded around her, gentle and deep. She didn't hear the chain clink again, didn't feel the cover settle back into place. Morning came slow, a gray light creeping over the village, but Ella wasn't in her bed. Her house stood empty, the lantern gone, the suitcase still unpacked by the door. The well was silent now, its cover in place, the chain still, as if nothing had happened. The villagers didn't talk about it, not out loud, but they avoided the well more than ever, their steps quickening as they passed. Some said she'd left, driven away in the night, but others, the ones who'd heard the whispers before, knew better. They said the well took what it needed, that it called to those who were lost, offering them a place to stay. The air around it was heavier after that, the moss a little greener, the stones a little wetter, like something down there was breathing, waiting. No one looked for Ella, not really. The village had a way of forgetting, of letting things slip into the shadows. The well stayed where it was, a quiet shape against the trees, its whispers locked away until the next night, the next wanderer. Maybe it's still there now, waiting in the dark, its voice soft and patient, ready to call out again. You can almost hear it, can't you? A faint hum, a sigh rising from the earth, brushing against your ears as you drift. Let it fade. Let it carry you. There's no need to look, no need to wonder. The night is calm, the story done, and the well is silent for now, holding its secrets close as you sink into sleep. The village stayed quiet after Ella vanished, the kind of quiet that seeps into your bones and makes you forget what noise ever sounded like. The well sat at the edge of the forest, its stones still damp, its cover locked tight by that rusted chain, swaying just a little when no one was looking. The villagers went about their days, tending to gardens or fixing roofs, but their eyes never lingered on that dark shape near the trees. They didn't talk about Ella, didn't ask where she'd gone. Her house stayed empty, the suitcase gathering dust, the air inside growing stale. But something had changed, something small, something you wouldn't notice unless you stood still and listened. The ground near the well felt softer now, like it was sinking just a little, and the moss on the stones spread wider, creeping up the wall as if reaching for the light. No one said it out loud, but they all felt it, a weight in the air, a hum that wasn't there before. Tom was the first to notice something new, though he didn't want to admit it. He lived 2 houses down from Ella's, an older man with rough hands and a limp from a fall years back. He'd seen her arrive, watched her through his window as she carried that suitcase inside. But he hadn't thought much of it. People came and went, and he liked his quiet. That morning, he stepped outside to fetch water from the pump, his breath fogging in the chilly dawn, and stopped cold. There was a mark on his door, faint and shallow, scratched into the wood like someone had dragged a nail across it. It wasn't words, wasn't a picture, just a line that curved and twisted, looping back on itself in a way that hurt his eyes to follow. He ran his fingers over it, the wood cold and splintered, and felt a shiver crawl up his arm, slow and heavy, like the mark was watching him back. He told himself it was nothing, just kids playing a trick. But the village didn't have many kids, and the ones it did stayed far from the well. Tom shook his head, grabbed his bucket, and limped toward the pump, the mark nagging at the back of his mind. The air felt thick that day, heavier than usual, and the forest loomed closer, its trees leaning in like they were listening. He filled the bucket, the water sloshing against the sides, and glanced toward the well. Its cover was still, the chain silent, but the moss glowed faintly, a green so deep it didn't look natural. He turned away quick, his heart beating a little too fast, and that's when he saw it. Another mark, this one on the pump, etched into the metal, the same twisting line that seemed to move if you stared too long. His hand shook as he carried the bucket home, the water cold against his fingers. That night, Tom couldn't sleep. The quiet was too loud, pressing against his ears like a weight he couldn't shake. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The mark on his door burned into his thoughts. He'd locked the house tight, checked the windows twice, but it didn't help. The air felt wrong, thick and damp, like the well had crept inside with him. Then he heard it, a whisper, soft and far away, sliding through the dark like a thread. It wasn't loud, wasn't clear, just a hum that brushed against his skin and made his breath catch. He sat up slow, his bad leg aching, and listened, the sound growing, curling around him like smoke. It came from outside, he was sure of it, from the direction of the well, and it called his name, Tom, soft and sweet, like a voice he'd forgotten. He shouldn't have gotten up, shouldn't have moved, but his feet hit the floor before he could stop them. The mark on his door glowed faintly when he reached it, a dull light that pulsed like a heartbeat, steady and slow. He stood there, his hand on the latch, the whisper filling his head, pulling him out into the night. The village was dark, the houses asleep, and the well waited at the end of the path, its stones black against the trees. The chain clinked as he got closer, a sound so soft it might have been his imagination, and the moss shimmered, wet and alive, spreading further up the wall. He didn't see the cover move, didn't hear it creak, but the whispers were stronger now, weaving through the air, promising rest, promising peace. His fingers brushed the mark on the pump as he passed, and it felt warm, too warm, like it had been sitting in the sun all day. He stopped at the well, his breath shallow, and looked down. The cover was off, the chain dangling loose, the dark inside staring back at him. The hole was deeper than he'd thought, a blackness that didn't end, and the whispers rose from it, clear now, words he could almost understand. Stay, come, sleep. Tom leaned forward, his bad leg trembling, and the air from the well touched his face, cool and heavy, carrying that same damp scent of stone and something older. He didn't know why he reached out, didn't know why his hand stretched toward the dark, but it felt right, like the well was waiting for him, like it had always been waiting. The whispers wrapped around him, soft and endless, and his eyes grew heavy, his body soft, like he could fall in and drift forever. He didn't hear the footsteps behind him, didn't see the figure step out of the trees, a shape too tall, too thin, its face hidden in shadow, its hands pale and steady. The figure didn't speak, didn't move closer, just watched as Tom swayed at the edge. The next morning, the village woke to silence, the kind that feels like a held breath. Tom's house was empty, the door ajar, the bucket tipped over on the porch, water soaking into the wood. The mark on the door was gone, the wood smooth again, like it had never been there, but the pump still bore its scar, the line twisting deeper into the metal. The well sat quiet, its cover back in place, the chain still, the moss a little thicker, a little greener. No one looked for Tom, not really. They knew better, knew the well had taken what it wanted. The air stayed heavy, the ground softer, and the whispers waited, locked away until night fell again. The figure in the trees was gone, melted back into the forest, but its presence lingered, a shadow that didn't need light to exist. Days passed, slow and gray, and the village shrank into itself, the houses emptier, the paths less worn. The marks started appearing again, not many, just one or two, scratched into a fence, carved into a tree, faint and shallow, but all was there. No one talked about them, didn't dare, but they felt them, felt the pull that came with them, the whisper that followed. The well stayed where it was, a dark shape against the forest, its stones sinking deeper into the earth, its moss spreading like a stain. The villagers kept their distance, their steps quick and quiet, but they couldn't outrun it. The air hummed now soft and steady, a sound that slipped into their dreams. The figure watched from the trees, its hands folded, its face unseen, waiting for the next mark to call someone home. The village felt smaller now, as if the forest had crept closer overnight, its trees pressing against the houses like a tide that wouldn't pull back. The air hung thick and damp, carrying a chill that settled into the bones of anyone who lingered outside too long. The well stayed at the edge, its stones darker, its moss sprawling wider, curling over the wall like fingers reaching for the ground. The marks were everywhere, on doors, on fences, scratched into the dirt, faint at first, but deeper each day, their twisting lines glinting in the gray light. The villagers moved slow, their eyes down, their voices hushed, as if speaking too loud might wake something they couldn't see. The whispers came every night now, soft and steady, slipping through cracked windows and under doors, calling names no one wanted to hear. The figure in the trees didn't hide anymore. It stood just beyond the well, tall and still, its shadow stretching long across the path. Mara lived alone, an old woman with gray hair and hands that shook when she poured her tea. Her house sat closest to the forest, its walls weathered and thin, letting the cold seep in no matter how high she stoked a fire. She'd seen Ella come and go, watched Tom limp past her window, but she kept to herself, locking her door tight when the whispers started. That morning, she found a mark on her porch, a single line carved into the step, looping and twisting like a snake caught mid-slither. She stared at it, her breath fogging in the air, and felt a hum under her feet, faint but alive, like the ground was breathing. She didn't touch it, didn't dare, just went back inside, bolted the door, and sat by the window, her hands wrapped around a cup that had gone cold. The forest stared back, its trees too quiet, too still, and she knew the mark wasn't alone. The day passed slow, the light dim and heavy, like the sun couldn't quite break through the haze. Mara stayed inside, her eyes flicking to the window every few minutes, watching the well in the distance. The chain on its cover swayed, though the air didn't move, and the moss glowed faintly, a green that didn't belong in the grayness. She heard the whispers before the sunset, soft, layered, sliding through the walls like water through cracks. They didn't call her name, not yet, just murmured, a sound that made her skin prickle and her chest tighten. She pulled the curtain shut, the fabric rough against her fingers, and lit a candle, its flame flickering in the draft. The mark on her step glowed through the wood, a dull pulse that matched the hum in the ground, and she felt it pulling, gentle but firm, like a hand on her shoulder. Night fell heavy, the kind of dark that presses against your eyes and makes the world feel small. Mara sat by the fire, the logs crackling soft and slow, but the warmth didn't reach her. The room was cold, too cold, like the well had stretched its breath inside. The whispers grew, weaving through the air, and this time they said her name, Mara, soft and clear, like a friend calling from far away. She gripped the arms of her chair, her knuckles white, and told herself to stay put, to ignore it. But her feet moved anyway, slow and unsteady, carrying her to the door. The mark glowed brighter now, its light seeping through the cracks, and the hum was louder, vibrating up her legs, steady and calm. She unbolted the door, her hand shaking, and stepped outside, the night wrapping around her like a cloak. The path to the well was different, narrower, longer, the dirt soft and damp under her slippers. The houses faded into shadow, their windows dark, their roofs sagging lower than she remembered. The forest loomed on both sides, its trees bending inward, branches brushing the ground like they were reaching for her. The well waited ahead, its cover off, the chain coiled in the moss, the dark inside deeper than the night around it. The whispers poured out, a chorus of voices, soft and endless, promising rest, promising quiet. Mara stopped at the edge, her breath shallow, and saw the figure standing by the trees, tall, thin, its cloak blending with the shadows, its hands pale and still. It didn't move, didn't speak, just watched, its presence heavy, like the air before a storm. The ground trembled just a little, and the moss pulsed, alive and wet, spreading up her slippers as she stood there. Mara leaned over the well, her hair falling around her face, and the air brushed her skin. Cool, thick, carrying a scent like earth after rain. The whispers were everywhere, filling her head, her chest, her bones, and she heard words now. Come, stay, belong. Her hands rested on the stones, cold and slick, and the dark below stared back, endless and calm, pulling her closer. She didn't see the figure step forward, didn't hear its cloak rustle, but she felt it, a weight at her back, a shadow that didn't need light to grow. Her eyes grew heavy, her breathing slow, and the well's voice wrapped around her, warm and deep, like a blanket she couldn't push away. She didn't fight it, didn't try. The dark was too soft, too kind. The village woke to silence again, the houses emptier, the air thicker. Mara's house stood open, the fire cold, the candle burned to a stub on the table. The mark on her step was gone, the wood smooth, but a new one appeared, scratched into the well's wall, deeper than the others, glowing faintly in the dawn. The cover was back, the chain tight, the moss thicker, curling over the stones like it owned them. No one looked for Mara. They knew where she'd gone, knew the well had called her name. The figure stayed by the trees, its shadow longer now, stretching across the path, and the whispers waited, soft and patient, for the next night. The ground sank deeper, the moss spread further, and the village felt it. The keeper was closer, its mark on everything, its voice in the air. The days grew shorter, the light weaker, and the villagers moved like shadows themselves, their steps quiet, their eyes hollow. The marks multiplied, on walls, on windows, etched into the earth, each one a thread tying them to the well. The forest pressed in, its trees taller, its roots breaking through the dirt, and the path to the well stretched longer, twisting into the dark. The whispers came earlier now before the sun set, soft and steady, calling names, one by one. The figure watched from the trees, its hands folded, its face hidden, and the village shrank, house by house, into the shadow of the well. The air hummed, the ground breathed, and the keeper waited, calm and still, for the next mark to glow. The village was shrinking, not just in people, but in the way it felt. Houses leaned closer to the ground, their walls cracking, their windows fogging with a haze that didn't clear. The forest had swallowed the edges now, its trees standing so thick that daylight barely slipped through, leaving the air dim and gray even at noon. The well sat heavier at the end of the path, its stones sinking deeper into the earth, its moss sprawling like a living thing, green and wet, curling over everything it touched. The marks glowed everywhere, on fences, on rooftops, scratched into the dirt, faint pulses of light that flickered in the gloom, tying the village to the dark. The whispers never stopped, soft and constant, weaving through the air like threads, calling names in a voice too gentle to resist. The figure stood closer now, not just in the trees, but on the path, its cloak brushing the ground, its hands pale and still, watching as the village faded. The ground hummed, a low, steady beat, and the air grew cold, thick with a dampness that clung to the skin. Leah was young, barely 20, with dark eyes and a habit of biting her lip when she was nervous. She lived with her mother in a house near the center, a small place with a leaking roof and a door that didn't lock right. She'd heard about Ella, about Tom, about Mara, whispers from the old folks who sat by their fires and stared at nothing, but she didn't believe them, not really. That morning, she woke to a mark on her window, a single line scratched into the glass, twisting and looping like it was alive. She touched it. She heard the whispers before night fell, faint at first, sliding under the door, brushing against her ears. They didn't call her yet, just murmured, a sound that made her skin crawl and her chest tighten. She checked the door, pushed a chair against it, but the hum was there, vibrating up through the floor, steady and calm. Her mother didn't notice, didn't hear. She just hummed, her eyes distant, her hands moving slow over a pile of mending that never got done. Night came fast, the dark pouring in like water, filling the house until the stove's light was all they had. Leah sat close to it, the warmth soft against her face. But it didn't help. The cold was deeper now, seeping into her bones, making her fingers shake. The whispers grew, weaving through the room, and this time they said her name, Leah, soft and sweet, like a lullaby she couldn't shake. She stood up, her legs unsteady, and looked at her mother, but the old woman didn't move, didn't blink, just sat there, humming, her needle still in the air. The mark on the window pulsed brighter, its light spilling across the floor, and the hum was louder, pulling her toward the door. She shouldn't have opened it, shouldn't have stepped out, but her hand was on the knob before she could stop it, the night calling her name in a voice too kind to ignore. The path was long, longer than it should have been, the dirt soft and wet under her boots, sinking with every step. The houses were gone, swallowed by shadow, and the forest pressed in, its trees tall and silent, their branches brushing her shoulders as she walked. The well loomed ahead, its cover off, the chain coiled in the moss, the dark inside endless and calm. The whispers poured out, a chorus of voices, soft and layered, promising rest, promising home. Leah stopped at the edge, her breath fogging in the air, and saw the figure standing there, not in the trees, but by the well, its cloak dark and heavy, its hands folded over something she couldn't see. It didn't look at her, didn't move, but she felt it, watching, waiting, its presence thick like the dampness around her. The moss pulsed, alive and green, climbing up her boots, and the ground trembled just a little, pulling her closer. Leah leaned over the well, her hair falling forward, and the air brushed her face, cool, wet, carrying a scent like stone and earth and something older. The whispers filled her head, her chest, her bones, and she heard words, stay, rest, belong. Her hands gripped the stones, slick and cold, and the dark below stared back, deep and quiet, calling her down. She didn't see the figure move, didn't hear its steps, but it was closer now, its shadow stretching over her, heavy and still. Her eyes grew heavy, her breathing slow, and the well's voice wrapped around her, warm and endless, like a tide she couldn't fight. She didn't notice her mother standing at the window, didn't hear the old woman's humming stop, just leaned further, her body soft, her mind drifting into the dark. The figure raised a hand, pale and steady, and the moss glowed brighter, curling around her like a net. The village woke to nothing, no sound, no light, just a silence that pressed against the walls. Leah's house was empty, the stove cold, the chair still pushed against the door. Her mother sat by the window, her hands limp, her eyes fixed on the well, a mark glowing on her cheek, faint, shallow, but alive. The well stayed quiet, its cover back, the chain still, the moss thicker, spreading over the path like a stain. No one looked for Leah. They knew the well had her, knew the keeper had marked her name. The figure stood by the well now, not moving, not speaking, its cloak blending with the dark, its hands folded over the mark it carried. The ground sank deeper, the air grew colder, and the whispers waited, soft and patient, for the next name to call. The village was fading, house by house, into the shadow of the well, and no one fought it, not anymore. The forest took more that day, its roots breaking through the dirt, its trees swallowing the fences, the paths, the light. The marks spread on walls, on stones, etched into the air itself, glowing faintly, pulsing with a life no one understood. The villagers stayed inside, their doors locked, their fires low, but it didn't matter. The whispers found them, soft and steady, slipping through the cracks. The figure moved slow, its shadow long, its presence heavy, marking the village piece by piece. The well breathed, its moss alive, its dark endless, and the path stretched further, twisting into the forest, calling the rest. The air hummed, the ground pulsed, and the keeper waited, calm and quiet, its hands never still.